As she was walking, she made a phone call to her boyfriend. She spoke with him until 9:28 p.m. and she made plans to meet him the following day. But the next day, she did not show up to meet her boyfriend, and after waiting a while, he reported her missing to the police at around 8 p.m. on March 4th. So the police began looking for her in the vicinity of the home of the friends that she was having dinner with, and they knocked on everyone's door and asked if they had seen anything. And they put out word that Sarah was missing and asked the public to come forward if they could find any CCTV type footage. So a bus driver found that on his dash cam, he actually was able to spot Sarah on Pointers Road, and she was talking to a man, and there was a small white van next to them with its hazards on. And the police went around to the homes just past that point to look at their doorbell cameras. And they came to realize that there was no further footage of Sarah after that point, but there was footage of her prior to that point in the route that she was, going to get home. So they deduced that she had gone missing from that exact spot. Now, it was lucky that they were able to see the license plate on the white van, and they traced it to a car rental agency. And interestingly enough, the car had been rented to Wayne Cousins. He used his real name. He was a police officer, a current working police officer from the Metropolitan Police. That, I believe, is, the London, public police force. So a little info on him. He was 48 at that time. He had worked for many years for his family's auto mechanic shop. He had been in the Army Reserves for a time, and then in his 30s he had decided to become a police officer. He started out working for the, let me look this one up, it's a unusual word to me. I'm not quite sure why. Harvey just figured, let's go spend a day, in nature. I don't know if there was any reason behind that, but he brought them there. Then, on March 8th, he called in sick to work. So, some of my thoughts. Obviously, I think it is absolutely horrendous that someone who is a police officer who we are expected to trust